Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. So I wanted to have a conversation because I might be, among others, in listening to today's world-breaking record for the shortest khutbah and scratching my head going, what happened? So, because, we, Usuli is sort of well known for having, khutbahs that can last upwards of an hour and a half or more. And I know people have definitely expressed their concern, and they're brilliant, but it's hard on a khutbah day. So we've been having conversations behind the scenes about shortening khutbahs. So I think today you sort of pushed that to the limit. But it was fabulous and fascinating, but definitely confusing. And so I wanted to ask you what happened and how and why did you, because actually it was fabulous for me because it left me wanting more, but what you said was so powerful. But I just wanted to ask you what your thought process was and how you arrived at this 8-minute khutbah that packed a punch, especially with everything going on in the world.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you. It was also partially a surprise to myself. I mean, I knew that it was shorter than my typical long-winded sermons, but there's a number of things that I was considering. One was, of course, we've been talking in general about what the khutbah is and how we as an institution want to try to be able to make these khutbahs accessible for people who are praying in different places, and we realize that it can become difficult and sometimes it goes towards a lecture. We're no stranger, or we're not afraid to push the envelope on things. And so we do go a bit longer and challenge our audience. And I think that in the recent events in the last month, and in particularly the last 2 weeks within the Syrian context, so much happened, and it was kind of like an explosion. That was a 14-year long wait for the entire world to see when this unsustainable reality would come to an end. We know all tyrants fall, and that it's inevitable, and the type of society that this dictator had constructed was headed towards a further implosion. He was clearly under the delusion that he might come out of this alive, and that he may, in fact, survive all of the brutal repression that he and his father executed upon the society for 50, 60 years. But part of what I wanted to focus on was pulling back and thinking, because there's tons of examples that we might give in this sermon. We might talk about Iran's involvement in Syria, and did they make the right choice by choosing geopolitical strategy over supporting the rights of the people. In the previous khutbah a long time ago, I filmed an addendum where I offered the criticism that I wish that the Iranian government had had some faith in the Syrian people and spoken to them and supported their democratic claims, and maybe even tried to help administer free elections, and told Assad to step down, or put pressure on him to step down and allow for the people to actually have a free election. And I'm sure that might have won over the people of Syria, and they would have had a good relationship with the state of Iran, and maybe perhaps together they could have opposed the state of Israel. But that didn't come to pass, and unfortunately they supported him. And I know there's a lot of nuance, and part of the reason why I didn't bring it up in the khutbah was because when it comes to this story, the Syrian story, no matter what one says, it feels like you may do injustice. And that's very, very, it's a high price that I don't want to be accountable for. And so that's why purposefully I was very careful to not say things that would rub everyone the right way or the wrong way. I'm not here to cheerlead for anyone or for any cause. And part of that confusion is exactly what pushed me towards thinking about these things in a more broad scope.
Yeah, I mean, it's really beautiful because you're right. Like, I know people really value your opinion and value the commentary that comes off the Prophet's pulpit on world events. You know, we often push like the importance of talking about what's happening in the world and then going back to the Quran and, you know, reflecting on what does that mean to become, you know, to be an ethical Muslim. And so I loved that you were able to bring it back to a very powerful core message, you know, from the Quran, something that pertains to everything happening in the world, but then also is a reminder. And you were saying after the khutbah that, you know, you recognize that people are being used in a particular way. I would love for you to share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, certainly. I just did a lot of reflecting on the state of tyranny, as we always do, here, on the state of tyranny and things like torture and despots. And it was just this question that I posed to myself. You know, if you ask anyone, what do they think of torture? Uh, there's no one who will say that torture is a good. Well, actually, I have to take that back. Sometimes people nowadays in certain settings will argue for it. But in general, the idea of torture, people will say, is not a good thing. But like I said in the khutbah, the world is filled with it. So there is some disconnect here, and what is that about? And the answer that I don't know if it's the answer, but I'm offering the answer is that the way that we are raised, are we raised with dignity? Are we raised with such levels of self-respect that we're not willing to accept, you know, a wrongful, erroneous taking or stifling of our rights as dignified human beings? You know, the longer that we allow for prisons to be like this, and the Syrian people said no. This is a prime example. This is why I'm citing them here. They said no, this is wrong. You know, and people are getting in the argument of, well, you have to zoom out and look at everything. But and I understand. But this is wrong. You know, and these prisons are destroying lives and destroying entire nations, like the Sheikh said just we were speaking a few minutes ago. With each prisoner and each act of torture, you're destroying an entire nation. And what makes a nation, you know, malleable to this process, and what makes a nation know that torture is wrong, but yet keep living on? You know, the buck does stop with us ultimately. This is something that I've been developing in my mind for, I mean, if you've been following along with the sermons, you'll understand. I've been trying to establish a pedagogy that I can, and a philosophy that I can really, you know, hang my hat on. It's the water in which the currents of rights and responsibilities flow comes from the morality of the people. And we need to learn the basics of morality. Just simply repeating the dogma or the, you know, sloganry of lying is not good and killing is not good, but then there's always a massive but. Lying is not good, but. So then we have to really go back and think. And to allude back to your question really quickly, is that you said that. So you said people are like vessels, and that's precisely correct. Either your vessel is filled with truth and godliness, or your vessel is filled with what a powerful person puts inside of your vessel. We're commodified. You know, obviously everybody knows that we work and the state benefits from our work product and all of this kind of stuff and tax money. But beyond that, especially in this social media world where information travels so quickly, we are the news outlets, individuals. And governments know this because they pump billions of dollars into this. And so they produce narratives to manufacture consent for the power that they then wage over a people, whether it's a separate government on a sovereign government, or whether it's a militia, or whether it's it doesn't really matter, whatever it is. So, but our job is not to wave the flag of the potential victor, or, oh, I had chosen this up and coming politician and I had supported him, or I knew that such and such would free Palestine, or I knew that such and such would free X. That's not what our job is. We aren't in the position of the power. I've talked a lot about the responsibility of people in the position of power, but what is the responsibility of the people that are looking towards the power? Our responsibility is to constantly interrogate them. They don't deserve praise for doing their jobs. How often do you get praise for doing your job, a basic job? Most of the time, never. And in fact, people are whipping, the whip and cracking the whip and saying, you're not working hard enough. And look at our earnings. It's not up to par. It's not a nice situation. So yeah, this was what was in my mind, is like, we have to be very wary of how our vessel is being filled. Because if we don't fill it with accountability and truth, then we'll be filled with the narrative of propaganda.
Yeah, I love what you were saying. I think you had said we have become like individual billboards for, right, the voice of power. And so I think that's why also is extremely powerful, just the essence of the message that you were saying. It's like coming back home, starting from childhood, starting from where we grow, like as individuals, even learning something as simple as don't lie, because lying then becomes, malignant. It spreads to every other aspect of your life. And I felt like the checklist that you provided about don't do this, don't lie, don't, was so powerful and so important. And you're right, like when we're seeing all of these images coming out of Syria, of the torture cells, it's really hard to talk about that, and it's even hard to bring it to an individual level, because you see the images, you understand the state narrative about how this is necessary, but at a personal level, especially for those of us who know people who have been tortured, and you were jailed as part of the student protest movement last year, so you felt what it is to be restricted. And I remember you said to me very recently how that is worse than, for example, slavery.
Yeah.
And how all of us have a visceral feeling about slavery, but when it comes to torture, we haven't made that leap yet. We haven't made that progress, because it's hard to see these images, it's hard to deny, it's hard to think about, and even if you don't know anybody that's experienced it, it's hard to really connect to that. But it all comes back to kind of that individual, like, where do we start?
Absolutely.
At home. And so that was extremely powerful. I don't know if you want to share any more of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do, especially on the bit of that it starts at home. I didn't share this in the khutbah, but I really should have. Like the parent-child dynamic. I don't have a child as of yet, but I have to admit that I haven't wanted to have a child until I've figured it out. Because I think sometimes we rush things without working through things, and then we just end up reproducing the default, factory settings that we come with, which is pretty much our education. And our education isn't just the formal education we receive, it's what we see. That's how we learn. It's like the Sheikh says, that we need models. And that's the thing, though, is everyone is whether you know it or not, you are being a role model for somebody. And I think parents love their children, of course. And parents have, I assume, from my vantage point as being a child, a deep insecurity that their child may not love them back. And they see disobedience as a sign of this lack of love. And a lack of control they also see as a lack of love. But I'm not speaking to other parents, I'm speaking to myself as somebody who's an aspiring parent. Uh, Children don't fall in love with parents or guides because you force them to. They don't fall in love with parents because they're told that in their ancient tradition, the father is as such and the mother is as such. And that's not compelling to a child.
Mm-hmm.
A child already understands that they are safer with their parent than they are outside of the home. The question is, why do they rebel? Part of it may be natural, but the other part of it is when a child doesn't feel that its dignity, that its individual essence is being respected or acknowledged. A child doesn't want to feel like a cog in the machine. They have to prepare to go out and do that anyways. So if they just see a parent like another unruly boss and there's not much to get from it, they're just biding their time to leave the system. The house is supposed to be a place of second, again, as the Sheikh says. So there's so much written about the responsibility of the child towards the parent. And there is some about the parent towards the child, but I think that the responsibility of the parent far outweighs that responsibility of the child to the parent. Because it's again this dynamic of power in that khutbah that Imam Ali talks about. And here's my advice to myself. If you want your child to love you, don't squeeze them. Don't choke the life out of them. Don't be rigid. Don't mold them to the shape that you think is best for them. Respect them and respect yourself and turn inwards and instead think about how you can improve your morality and your ethics. Because if you want to know what actually causes a child to fall in love with a role model, it's a person who is dedicated to being honest. It's a person that is not so proud as to not admit when they're wrong. It's a person who's quick to realize that they have slipped up and allowed for the anger to overtake them and fix it, no matter how long it takes. They make amends. Someone who makes amends gains the trust and the love and the appreciation of children and people alike. And that's my message, again, to myself first and foremost. And if I'm right, then I hope to broadcast that to everyone else. If you want your child to love you, be an excellent human being. Be an excellent moral exemplar. And let your child know that that's what you're aspiring towards. Not by empty words, but by action. Because we learn by watching each other.
Yeah. Absolutely, 100%. And, having, had a child and children, the thing that I would add to that is, I think children come loving you. So it's about how to nurture that love. And if you think about what you want as an individual, as all of us want, is to feel safe and respected and allowed to be who we are. Right? And so all of the things you said are 100% right. And it really is just the message of being like healthy and creating that expectation of health as, I can operate as, with respect, with dignity.
Yes.
In this environment as myself, like if I came to this earth as an artist or a poet, that I'm not shoved into, a lawyer
Correct.
vessel, right? And that's part of knowing what you said, like, if I want my child to love me, I'm not going to force anything, but create a nurturing environment where that child can thrive and continue to love. And I think that, I love the way that this message that we're talking about, dignity, freedom, being authentically what God created us to be and serve God with whatever tools we have keeps arising through, the khutbahs, through the everything we learn in the Quran. It's guiding us towards a very vibrant, healthy environment. And right now Muslims are very unhealthy because they are on the receiving end of so much trauma and oppression and so part of us reclaiming and whether it's decolonizing or just getting healthful is, as you exactly pointed out, is reclaiming these very fundamental, beautiful, powerful principles that are so transformative and intuitive. So thank you so much for this brilliant khutbah that proves that you can have a feast in a very small container that can be life transforming. And I hope, inshallah, sometimes you have to deal with the whole world with something very precise and concise that brings us back to a beautiful message. Thank you for giving that to us today.
Thank you.
Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Was that okay?
Did I talk enough?
Thank you. I feel much better.
Does it answer why it was so short?
You helped to regulate me.
You want me to be long-winded? I can be long-winded.
No, I forgot the cherry on top because we were praying, and I was like, why is he not reciting? Why is he saying it?
I know, I was wondering.
Oh, because I wasn't you. Oh,
because your voice. You said your voice is.
My voice is shot.
And I was like, I'm like something weird going on.
I know. I was like, yeah. Why is he not reciting?
It's like
He's
you know what?
testing
Actually,
us.
me and Rami set this whole thing up. You've been pranked. You've been pranked. This was an elaborate plan. Did you not see me? Even this part I was writing this morning. So I genuinely thought that, okay, this is...
Yeah, now I believe it. But
I was stuck with the wine jar last night.
Is he mad at me?
That was so great.
Alhamdulillah.
Are
Thank
you
you so
happy?
much.
Did you have a chance to say
That yes. I added the
Okay.
part that was missing in
Okay,
there was the child and the parent love
Yeah.
dynamic. Thank you
That
for
was
doing
really
that because that
powerful.
helped me a lot. I totally forgot what I was gonna say, and so your questions helped. Thank you so much.
Alhamdulillah.
And of course, your insight was very, very valuable. Very, very
so
nice.
much.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you all.
Thank you guys. This is fun. This is so
Yeah.
cool. I like